All right, guys, we are back here on the early line. Davis Maddock and Mark Zinno. We just wrapped up hour one, a lot of Super Bowl 58 discussion. I imagine we will probably mention the big game here a few more times on the program, but we are going to transition into some hoops coverage here in the second hour of the program. We are going to take a look at a big weekend in college basketball. We had a big Saturday. UConn defeated Georgetown 89-64. Purdue beat Indiana. North Carolina beat Miami. Kansas got a ranked win against Baylor. Pretty close, though, 64-61. Number 5 Houston beat Cincinnati. And Texas A&M beat Tennessee, beat them down. Zeno, walk me through some of these results. What was most surprising to you and what went chalky?
Well, I mean, you just mentioned it. The A&M beatdown of Tennessee was, to me, a little bit surprising. I thought it was one of those spots where Tennessee would remind everybody, and again, full disclosure, I was on Tennessee, would remind everybody that, hey, we're just a better team than Texas A&M. And they are a better team than Texas A&M. But you give credit to the Aggies for the way that they played. They have a good defense. That's an awful offense. Like Texas A&M's offense is pathetically bad. And of course, it's a game where they're one of the worst three-point shooting teams in the country. Like they average like 28% from three, and they shot 50% from three pretty much through the first half. Tennessee just was terrible offensively in the game. You know, Tennessee basically didn't score a single point from bridging the first half to the end of the second. They from 3:36 in the first half to the first 15:33. So what are we talking there, Davis? 8 minutes straight, they didn't score a single point. Tennessee didn't from the first half to the second. So their offense let them down. They were really bad, but you give credit to the A&M defense, which is very good on the road. Big win for, you mentioned Kansas over Baylor in a tight game at Fog Allen Fieldhouse. That win was impressive. The Big 12 continues to be the best conference in college basketball by a wide margin. And, you know, the Kentucky-Gonzaga game, I don't know if anybody paid attention to this, even though it was a non-conference game. You know, Gonzaga comes out with a win at Rupp Arena. And I think Kentucky is still very good. They're probably not as good as a lot of people think that they are. And there's an argument to say they might not even be able to be ranked right now because when it comes to the SEC, Tennessee, Auburn, and Alabama, I think are all better than Kentucky by a wide margin. But, you know, Gonzaga, for a team that hasn't been ranked a lot this year, that typically is one of those teams that we see in the top 25, you know, they are a team that a lot of people thought might have been broken, but they're not. I think that's going to be a dangerous team come tournament time that's flying under the radar. And the other game, too, Davis, you mentioned there that we see the graphic. Florida defeating Auburn was kind of surprising, I think. I thought Auburn was going to be a team that, you know, after they had their win over Alabama and the way that they played was going to turn the corner. Florida spanked them. And I know Florida was a short dog in that game, but Florida, I mean, they just owned them in that spot. And I was really impressed with what Florida did and what they put together, given what was on the line there. And an Auburn offense that's usually pretty legit only scored 26 points in the first half, and that's all she wrote for the Tigers in that game. But the SEC, again, at the top, gets pretty tight and convoluted. You know, I just talked about some of the teams, Florida, Kentucky, and A&M, all sitting at that 6-4 record, chasing Tennessee, Auburn, Alabama, and South Carolina, who I still am wondering if they are that good. We're going to find that out coming up here over the course of this week as they have some interesting spots coming up. They have to travel to Auburn, and then they get LSU and Ole Miss in back-to-back games, which are two pretty competitive and fast-paced teams. So the SEC, another conference that people sort of forget how good they are in college hoops.
Yeah, Fire Cal was trending on Twitter on Saturday, which is, look, I mean, you know, be careful what you wish for. We've got some more results here. Duke beat Boston College. Michigan State getting a win over Illinois. Unranked Rutgers beats Wisconsin. Florida beats Auburn. Now, let's take a look at the college basketball national championship odds. I mean, it feels like there's got to be a little bit of value there. No team right now on the FanDuel Sportsbook is deeper than plus 650. I know Zeno, that every year I end up, we get a little bit closer to March, we get to the conference tournaments, I log on to KenPom.com. I see that his stuff absolutely loves Houston. Every year I log on, I'm like, oh, Houston, the advanced analytics darling. I end up betting them every single year heading into the tournament. They give me a fun little run and then end up being disappointing. What do you make of this board right now? Are there any wagers that you think look strong?
I mean, it's interesting that if you look at that board, and we bring the graphic back up again here, and you look at just the conferences that are there. I see a couple of Big Ten teams. I see a couple of Big 12 teams. I see a couple of SEC teams. There's only one Big East team there, and that's the favorite in UConn. And I don't think UConn is the best team in the country. The Big East is as stacked as you could imagine when it comes to the top of that conference. I think there's an argument as far as making the Final Four. Marquette, Creighton, all legitimate options to get there. And not that I necessarily believe that they are a national title team, but Villanova now gets in a very interesting spot here with a team that's got a lot of veteran presence and plays a certain style that a lot of teams struggle with because they play so slow and they're so effective from a shooting standpoint. But they get a chance, other than playing UConn, to run the table in the East and put themselves in position to become a top 25 team when they get when we start talking about conference championship week and then into the selection Sunday. I think the Big East is undervalued. I think there are a lot of teams there that you can look at. I think a lot of those other teams we saw, teams like Iowa State, that have a lot of flaws and a lot of warts. But the Big East has a lot of complete teams. You look at Marquette, this is a team that's top 10 in KenPom. Creighton, top 20 in KenPom. These are teams that are top 25, both offensive adjusted efficiency and defensive adjusted efficiency on both ends of the floor. And it's hard to find that and the depth of that in the conference. Sure, you get the Big 12 that has, teams like Houston that have a lot of high watermarks, especially on the defensive side of the ball. But then you look to their offense, you go, okay, well, there's a gap there. And I think that's where you look at some of those teams that I'd say have warts. They're just a little bit more unbalanced than some of the teams in the Big East. And when you talk about conference national championship odds, Davis, and getting to the floor, you got to find teams that do it well on both ends of the floor.
Yep, which is why I know I'm already staring into the future. I, of course, will be taking this Houston ticket. Maybe I'll just take it right now to get it out of the way. The number one team in adjusted defense on KenPom. Interesting for me as a more casual observer to see Alabama, an SEC team not known as like a real powerhouse basketball school in general, to be number one in adjusted efficiency on offense. Very excited to getting to the tournament, learning more about all of the players. I have heard it's a very weak incoming NBA draft class, so kind of always interesting how that impacts the way that I, as a big NBA fan, view the tournament. And speaking of the NBA, we are going to be getting into it with Coach James Young here very soon. Zeno and I are going to go ahead and run into break here real quick on the program. Some NBA conversation coming up with you. Don't go anywhere. We'll be back on the grid here in a few moments.
Thought that Mike would maybe go in a different direction, or at least listen to some people with some different ideas.
If you were going to retain Mike Tomlin as coach, and I believe with both feet that you shouldn't let him really anywhere near this hire. That he had proved over the years that this was not an area of comfort or expertise for him.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
The Chargers have the 5th pick in the National Football League draft. There's a lot of different roads that they could take with this pick. And for the record as well, there's a few sports books out there already that already have next year's Super Bowl numbers up. The Chargers are like 30-1. So there's a lot of work to do.
Sports Rage Late Night, only on SportsGrid.
My goodness, if the Bucs come out strong and certainly make a point to say, look, even though we haven't been playing our best basketball, we're here to beat you down. And that's a big-time win for the Milwaukee Bucks.
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.
I'll take 12 or more years of suffering, the last Take a look. Go look at it yourself. After Bear Bryant, all they did was lose.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid, your 24/7 sports wagering network.
We'll look at the Heisman Trophy
The early
race
line.
and what it all means. Individual success.
You should have tried to get something for Anthony Rendon. Not bought at the deadline.
Newswire.
We're getting a lot of news, trades, cuts, and some movement in terms of starting quarterbacks,
Pharrell
backup quarterbacks.
Coast to Coast.
I want to watch great players make buckets and win games.
Game time decisions.
I have no idea what the heck the Blazers are doing and what they
In-game live.
Just
Prime
took 'em
time.
yard for a grand slam.
The bottom of the fourth inning in a 12-2 baseball game. We got football scores going on at Wrigley right now.
Sports Rage
That was
Late
good betting.
Night.
We waited for 1.5. We got paid.
We did.
Didn't like the 2.5. Jumped on it.
no taking weeks off in golf betting ever. These are the best weeks to bet.
It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back here on the early line on SportsGrid. Davis Maddock and Mark Zinno with you. We are now going to be turning our attention to the National Basketball Association. We had some pretty awesome games over the weekend. Now, obviously, they were overshadowed by the Super Bowl. Pretty big. We had some big NBA stars at the game last night. But Boston, Miami, kind of when you're classic Eastern Conference rivalries, the Heat not having the season that they necessarily thought they'd be having. Jimmy Butler has been in and out. He's on bereavement leave right now. The Celtics scraped out a win. They are 41-12, 110-106. Tatum almost had a triple-double. Porzingis had a pretty strong game, but did come down with a lower back contusion. We'll see what ends up happening there. Obviously, these teams are about to go into the All-Star break. Zeno, is it as simple as the Heat are just thinking that they can do what they did last year? Look, we'll be the 7th seed. We'll get to the play-in, and we know that Jimmy Butler he just historically elevates his game. And then on the converse, the Boston Celtics are like, look, we are the best team in the regular season. We've been the best team in the regular season. What more do we have to prove? Both of these teams, honestly, are really just looking towards the postseason at this point.
Well, I wouldn't, if I'm Miami, I wouldn't run that philosophy back again that we can just sort of, coast through the regular season as the 8 or 9 seed and in the play-in and, make a run to the finals again. That's not going to happen. The East is much deeper this year than it was last year. I think the teams are better, and the dynamics of it, again, with the team, let's just take a team like Indiana, who's been very good at home this year, and they have one of the highest scoring offenses in the league. Like, those are styles make fights kind of game. And if Indiana plays Miami in a series and they can get out to a lead early, Miami doesn't have the offense to keep up. Like, you're going to have to figure out a way to shut down that offense of Indiana. And I just don't know it's a great formula for them. A team like the Knicks, very good on the offensive and defensive end. We know the Bucks struggle defensively, but, do you want to go punch for punch with Giannis in a 7-game series? And even the Cavs, to a certain extent, who I think are a little bit of a paper tiger, so to speak, given, their lack of depth beyond Donovan Mitchell and what else is really there. But I think the East is just a whole different world. So if I'm Miami, I'm trying to win as many games as possible and put myself in as good a position to get home court advantage.
That is a good point. I think they'd be pretty well served to get home court advantage. But, just with how rough and tumble that offense, they just don't take enough 3-pointers, right? It's the modern NBA, and this is a team that still takes a lot of 18-foot jump shots. I have been, personally wanting Tyler Hero to just be a little bit more a little bit more of just a pure shooter, kind of let someone else initiate a lot of the offense and finish a lot of possessions. Now, obviously, that is harder said than done when you're kind of reconfiguring your ball handling duties on the fly because Butler's in, then he's out, and your point guard changes. And it's a lot of work. Now, Spoelstra, I do think, is the best coach in the NBA. So I think a lot of that stuff he is going to figure out. My favorite team, Oklahoma City, they played against the Sacramento Kings on the weekend. Two young, up-and-coming teams in the NBA. Domantas Sabonis, of course, used to be a member of the Oklahoma City Thunder, kind of two teams whose fates are interacting with one another. Oklahoma City is, kind of sitting here atop the conference in the Western Conference. They did make a trade. They added Gordon Hayward. He is going to be eligible to return. They get a 127-113 win. The Kings sit at 30-22. The Thunder at 36-17. What do you make of this incredibly young Thunder team? They don't really have a backup center. Were something to happen to Chet Holmgren in the playoffs here. What do you make of a team where everyone's like 25 years old being atop the Western Conference as we head into the All-Star break?
I mean, look, I think we've seen this script before, and you hit a rewind button to the Memphis Grizzlies 2 or 3 years ago with Ja Morant, right? Where they were the 1 seed. They looked like they could beat anybody on any given night, and they looked very energetic. And then you get to the playoffs, and guess what? Those young guys are all 25 who've never played a lot of playoff games, if any at all. You know what they realized for the first time? Oh, yeah, this is different. It's a lot different than we just did for 82 games. You mean guys are playing defense for a full 48 minutes here? Nah, get out of town. Stop it. And they just get outclassed. And that's probably what's going to happen. I mean, I'm not saying Oklahoma City is going to lose their first-round series, but go ahead and face a LeBron team in the playoffs. Go ahead and face a Steph Curry team in the playoffs. Go ahead and face a Denver Nuggets team that has depth, right, and shooters and plays defense. Like, you kind of just go up against it and you realize that you're not as good as you thought you were. Now, again, from a betting standpoint, I hope a team like the Thunder continues to win games and continues to, start to get overvalued, because when they get into a series against one of those big teams, guess what? I can play on the other side when I'm getting the probably more experienced, deeper, better team at almost a discount price, right? Like, that's kind of the way I hope it goes. And it's the same thing with a team like the Timberwolves. These are teams that haven't won anything, and during the regular season, they have a desire to prove to everybody how good they really are. Whereas the smarter teams, and we've seen this before from LeBron, we've seen this before from the Warriors with Steph, and the Warriors this year obviously are a different example because they're just not very good. But, when you get in a postseason series with them, it's like, okay, we've done this before. We know how to do this. We know we can get through a series here and win a couple of games. The real question is the Clippers, right? Like, that is the team that if they get the 1 seed, is anybody going to beat them? Or is that a ticket to them to go to the finals? Because the way they've played this year and how good that they've been, that is that's still for my money, the best team in the NBA. I think the Clippers absolutely are. So it's just a question of now proving it. And they do have that proven star in Kawhi Leonard, who knows how to get through the postseason, who's done it with 2 different organizations and won world championships to 2 different organizations. That puts me over the top with them.
I think over the last 40 games of the NBA season, I don't really think there's an argument that the Clippers have been the best team. Kawhi Leonard is at full. He's playing at the peak of his powers, right? I don't really think anyone possession by possession has really been better than him. Now, obviously, I think Jokic probably is the most valuable player in the NBA. He plays more minutes, he plays more games, all that stuff. But I would not begrudge anyone right now if we did a straw poll before the start of the All-Star game, if Kawhi Leonard was getting some MVP votes. Now, the Clippers, you could have gotten a pretty solid price on them after the James Harden trade when they lost 7 games in a row before they reconfigured the starting lineup. You could have got a pretty strong price on them to win the NBA championship. Right now, the Celtics are favored at plus 260. The Nuggets trail right after them. I know I'm going to be alone on this. I don't hate the number for the Timberwolves at 24-1. They have the best defense in the NBA. And I'm just waiting for Anthony Edwards to take, he's already taken a leap, but I'm waiting for him to take that next leap. And maybe it's not going to happen. Maybe the vibes are just too bad after this rough stretch they've been going in. Does anyone jump out to you as valuable in the futures market for the NBA right now?
I mean, again, I think when you get the defending champions as the non-favorite, that's always an interesting spot, right? Like, I'm with you from the standpoint that the Nuggets as a team are as good and as deep as anybody out there. So there's no wrong with me playing on them. Again, I go back to the Clippers and wonder, hey, can they actually get over the hump? They've been in this situation before. Granted, it was with other stars, Chris Paul and other guys like that were not, as accomplished as Leonard. But, the 1-2 punch of Kawhi Leonard and Paul George on both ends of the floor, I think is really tough to turn down at this point in time.
Yeah, I like that one. I mean, ultimately, I think the story of the playoffs is going to be defined by, can the Celtics just figure out their offense? Because that has been the thing with Boston for so long, is they've got this crazy defense. They change head coaches. It doesn't matter. The defense is still insane. But somehow, Jaylen Brown has still not learned to dribble. And Jason Tatum is not that great at initiating the offense. So kind of the whole thing comes down to Drew Holiday, who I think was you have to say, one of the better offseason acquisitions of all time. The Porzingis stuff fits like a glove. We're obviously going to keep a close eye on that. And we're going to be joined by Coach James Young here in just a few moments. Zeno and I are going to head into break. More NBA conversation here in a few moments. Don't go anywhere.
Thought that Mike would maybe go in a different direction, or at least listen to some people with some different ideas.
If you were going to retain Mike Tomlin as coach, and I believe with both feet that you shouldn't let him really anywhere near this hire. That he had proved over the years that this was not an area of comfort or expertise for him.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
The Chargers have the 5th pick in the National Football League draft. There's a lot of different like roads that they could take with this pick. And for the record as well, there's a few sports books out there already that already have next year's Super Bowl numbers up. The Chargers are like 30-1. So there's a lot of work to do.
Sports Rage Late Night, only on SportsGrid.
My goodness, if the Bucks come out strong and certainly make a point to say, look, even though we haven't been playing our best basketball, we're here to beat you down. And that's a big-time win for the Milwaukee Bucks.
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.
I'll say 12 or more years of suffering. Take a look. Go look at it yourself. After Bear Bryant, all they did was lose.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid, your 24/7 sports wagering network.
We'll look at the Heisman Trophy
The Early Line,
and what it all means. Individual success.
You should have tried to get something for Anthony Rendon. Not bought at the deadline.
Newswire.
We're getting a lot of news, trades, cuts, and some movement in terms of starting quarterbacks,
Pharrell Coast to Coast.
I want to watch great players make buckets and win games.
Game time decisions.
I have no idea what the heck the Blazers are doing and what they
In-game live,
Just
prime time.
Yard for a grand slam.
The bottom of the 4th inning in a 12-2 baseball game. We got football scores going on at Wrigley right now.
Sports Rage
That was
Late
good betting.
Night.
We waited for 1.5. We got paid.
We did.
Didn't like the 2.5. Jumped on.
There's no taking weeks off in golf betting ever. These are the best weeks to bet.
It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
All right, guys, welcome back to the early line here on SportsGrid. Davis Maddock with you, Mark Zinno. We are into hour two. We are talking about the NBA, and we are joined by Coach James Young here. We're going to go over some trade deadline acquisitions. Some of these guys have gotten a chance to feature for their new teams. Some are waiting to debut. And, Coach, we are going to go ahead and begin with the Philadelphia 76ers, who are dogs tonight to the Cleveland Cavaliers. They are waiting for Joel Embiid to get back. They did do something very crucial, which was they kept plenty of cap space for this upcoming offseason. They are going to be a team that can afford to bring in a maximum superstar if they find the right guy, if they find a sign and trade or someone becomes available. But they acquire Buddy Hield, who I honestly think was like a really strong acquisition given what they had to work with, because Buddy does one thing, JY, and that dude likes to get buckets, which is pretty important when you're on a team with Tyrese Maxey and with Joel Embiid.
Yeah, Dave, it's good to be on with you. Obviously, when you look at a guy like Buddy Hield, he is someone that stretches the floor. And I think that's what you need now, because you get more driving lanes and opportunities for Maxey and then Embiid once Embiid gets healthy. I think also, to a lesser degree, we got to talk about picking up Kyle Lowry. Comes back home, the Philadelphia native, former Villanova player, comes back to Philadelphia and kind of takes that backup spot for Pat Bev, which really didn't seem to work that well. So I think Philadelphia, did what they had to do. Could they have done more? Maybe, but the guys that gave away really don't play much. Korkmaz already got released. Morris, so, there's not much there. I do think what's interesting to note, folks, is the fact that we do have Tobias Harris on an expiring deal. Look for Tobias Harris to be part of a signing trade, possibly in the offseason. I don't know if that allows a superstar to come in or you get that cap relief and go get someone else. But that should be the next domino to fall in the offseason, Tobias Harris. And I would dare say is maybe if Tobias Harris, I'm sorry to say this, if Joel Embiid was healthy, maybe they trade Tobias Harris and go more all in for this year. Philadelphia's got to kind of play the long game a little bit, not just this year, but the next couple of years, not knowing when JoJo's going to come back.
Coach, it's interesting staying in the East here. You talk about a team that's made a lot of moves at the deadline, the New York Knicks, even throughout the course of the year prior to the deadline with the trade with Toronto. But they're sort of trying to set their roster up for a playoff run right now. What do you think of the moves that the Knicks have made so far, and how far can they take them?
Mark, you look at a guy like Leon Rose, who doesn't even come out and talk to the media. Like the last time he talked to the media, I think was 2 years ago. And it's been so crucified. But you got to admit, for the first time, the New York Knicks are set up for short-term and long-term success. And that's something we have not seen. Obviously, the acquisition starts with Brunson. Randall's has been pretty good this year. I know the odd even year thing, maybe he's bucked that trend. But to me, when they traded Barrett and quickly, Mark, you kind of saw a shifting of the guard offensively, where you took away two guys that are ISO guys, 101 guys, and now you space the floor with shooters, right? So you go get OG Anunoby, really good shooter, especially from the corner three, which is his hot spot, right? And then you go get Precious Achiuwa as a valuable backup big. But then you double down, you go get Bogdanovich and Burke, two other guys that are shooting the ball at 40% from three. DiVincenzo's game has stepped up, Mark. And the key thing is this. If they're healthy, I think they're the second best team in the East. And here's the caveat, folks. The number is 7. That's the number of first-round draft picks they have at their disposal. They traded none of them. And that means, Mark, there is still one more fish to get. It's going to be in the offseason, because if they get close, Leon Rose has the draft capital to go all in and try to bring a championship back to New York, first time since 1973.
Yeah, well, I think that those two teams that we just talked about, there might be a little bit of dovetailing, Coach, because, the rumor for a long time has been it's that big fella in Philadelphia that the Knicks are interested in. Another year of Embiid's season getting disrupted by injury. We'll see what the 76ers are able to do with all of that cap space. But, 7 first-round picks and swaps and, Jalen Brunson, we'll see. There are some interesting deals that could be worked out between the two teams. All right, let's go through these final three. P.J. Washington and Daniel Gafford to the Mavs, the Thunder, do a small something by adding an adult in the room in Gordon Hayward, and the Bucks swap backup point guards Patrick Beverley for Cam Payne. Which one of these three moves are most likely to impact who wins the NBA championship this season, in your opinion?
I think it's got to be Gordon Hayward. You know, when you look at a team that's so young and inexperienced in Oklahoma City, with Sam Presti, with the 38 draft picks he had going into his disposal before the trade deadline, to go get an experienced guy like Gordon Hayward. And it's interesting, guys. Gordon Hayward was going to be a prime, ready, buyout candidate. So what Oklahoma City did is they made the trade to go get him now, because probably they weren't going to get him in the buyout market, if that makes sense. He was going to go somewhere else. Rumored to be New York, maybe LA, somewhere else. But you get an adult in the room, which really benefits him. Now, for me, I know Gafford kind of helps as a big PG Washington. That doesn't do it enough for me for Dallas, because that still doesn't put them, to me, in the top 5 in the Western Conference. So I don't think that's a help. And Milwaukee, we'll see. If you look at their metrics, right, they lose Darvin Ham a couple of years ago, who was the defensive coordinator, right? You lose the best on-guard defender in Drew Holiday in the offseason. You lose Grayson Allen, an underrated defender. They were getting shredded, Davis, by high-quality scoring point guards. Look at what Brunson and Halliburton has done to Milwaukee. So what do? You go get the biggest pest in the NBA and say, go sick him. And that's what Pat Bev is going to do. I don't think it helps enough to get them to the championship, because I think the biggest problem they have is the guy that's the head coach.
Let's go over to the West Conference here, Coach. When you look at, we were talking earlier about the Oklahoma City Thunder and kind of where they are. And, you know, they get an impressive win yesterday, actually a much needed one in the way that they beat up on the Kings. But, you know, what's the limit for this team right now? Are they considered somebody who you think could get past the second round of the playoffs? I mean, I know they'll probably win their first round series, depending on where they fall in the regular season. But is this a team that can win 2 playoff series right now?
You know what? It's hard to say, Mark. I just think when you get into the playoffs, everything is magnified, right? And you get the best of the best every night. And it's a 7-game series. And you got to be able to address and make changes. And Mark Daigneault's done as good of a job as anybody. Should be the coach of the year. Him and Finch should be the leaders of the clubhouse here for coach of the year. But when you look at it, where do they land? What side? Or can they stay away from the Suns? Can they stay away from the Clippers? If you can put them on the obviously the Nuggets, it all, Mark, is going to come down to positioning of where everybody is in the Western Conference. Because to me, I've always said this as a coach, styles make fights. And that is going to be the big key here as we come down the stretch. With the rankings, and obviously you look at a team in Oklahoma City, 3rd place, 1 out of the loss column with Minnesota and the Clippers. So to me, what they probably need to be at home as long as possible. They have the 21st strength of schedule, so they do have an easier path down the stretch than everybody ahead of them. I think it's critical for them to try and get the 1 seed and hope that can at least take 2 of the 3 teams and the Clippers and the Nuggets and put them on the other side of the bracket and pray Phoenix drops to 6 and put everybody on the other side. And then they got an easier path to the Western Conference Finals.
Well, I could not agree with you more. Nobody wants to play Phoenix in these playoffs, right? I mean, that's just the way it is. Like, maybe they're scuffling a little bit in the regular season. Oh, Grayson Allen's banged up here, and Beal's got an ankle injury here, and Devin Booker's got a rest here, and Kevin Durant's having to play some center because Yusuf Nurkic is not with the team. Like, I guarantee you, any team, right? I mean, you get to the final, no team wants to play Kevin Durant, Bradley Beal, and Devin Booker in a playoff series. And, I mean, look, they are kind of figuring it out on defense, too, which would have been the problem with those 3 guys. Like, they really are getting so much better. Let's transition now to NBA MVP odds, Coach. We can go ahead and end on this. Jokic, to no one's surprise, is now minus 140 to win this award. Giannis got his coach fired. Hard to win an MVP when you get your coach fired. The Mavericks, not going to win enough games. I think if the Mavericks ended up being the 4 seed, I'd probably vote for Luka. But let's just be real about it. Nikola Jokic is the best player in the NBA until proven otherwise. Like, you have that guy on your team, you win 50 games. It's really that simple.
Yeah, I mean, it really is that simple. And I think the one thing you have to watch out for Davis, and we've seen this in the NBA, it's called voter fatigue. And we've seen this before when you think about this. We go through the history of the NBA. How many MVPs could LeBron should have won? How many Kobe should have won? How many could Shaq could have won? How many that Michael Jordan could have won? There is voter fatigue. And I think that is the only thing you have to be careful about when you deal with the NBA is there voter fatigue in regards to who should win the MVP? When you look at the odds, and obviously you can't, no Halliburton, no Embiid because they missed too many games. I'm telling you, I'm still looking at two guys. I'm looking at Brunson. If the Knicks can find a way to get the 2 seed, he's gone from plus 2, I would think it was 20,000 to 6,000. I've seen it lower in other books. He's going to make a run if they continue to win. And Kawhi Leonard at 29-1. If they get the 1 seed and Kawhi's playing like Kawhi and he plays every game, those are two guys you can look at to possibly win the MVP.
I think you're definitely right. Like Kawhi, I was just telling this to Zeno, like I would not be mad if someone voted for him. I would not vote for him right now. The raw numbers are not quite there, but I don't think you could say he is undeserving. We're going to go ahead and run a break here real quick on the program. More NBA discussion when we are back on the early line.
Thought that Mike would maybe go in a different direction or at least listen to some people with some different ideas.
If you were going to retain Mike Tomlin as coach, and I believe with both feet that you shouldn't let him really anywhere near this hire. That he had proved over the years that this was not an area of comfort or expertise for him.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
The Chargers have the 5th pick in the National Football League draft. There's a lot of different roads that they could take with this pick. And for the record as well, there's a few sports books out there already that already have next year's Super Bowl numbers up. The Chargers are like 30-1. So there's a lot of work to do.
Sports Rage Late Night, only on SportsGrid.
My goodness, if the Bucks come out strong and certainly make a point to say, look, even though we haven't been playing our best basketball, we're here to beat you down. And that's a big-time win for the Milwaukee Bucks.
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.
I'll say 12 or more years of suffering. Take a look. Go look at it yourself. After Bear Bryant, all they did was lose.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid, your 24/7 sports wagering network.
We'll look at the Heisman Trophy
The Early Line,
and what it all means. Individual success.
You should have tried to get something for Anthony Rendon. Not bought at this deadline.
Newswire.
We're getting a lot of news, trades, cuts, and some movement in terms of starting quarterbacks,
Pharrell
backup quarterbacks.
Coast to Coast.
I want to watch great players make buckets and win games.
Game time decisions.
I have no idea what the heck the Blazers are doing and what they
In-game live,
Just
prime
took 'em
time.
yard for a grand slam.
The bottom of the 4th inning in a 12-2 baseball game. We got football scores going on at Wrigley right now.
Sports Rage
That was
Late
good betting.
Night.
We waited for 1.5. We got paid.
We did.
Didn't like the 2.5. Jumped on
There's
it.
no taking weeks off in golf betting ever. These are the best weeks to bet.
It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
All right, guys, we are back here on the early line on SportsGrid. Davis Maddock and Mark Zinno. We are joined right now by Coach James Young as we walk through the current NBA season. We've got a real marquee game tonight, about as good as it's going to get for the day after the Super Bowl. For the NBA, we have the MVP favorite and former MVP winner, Giannis Antetokounmpo, playing against each other, Nikola Jokic and Giannis, Denver and Milwaukee. Very tight spread here, as you would expect. 1 point either way. I wonder if we see this swing around a little bit during the day. We have the Milwaukee Bucks, who are honestly, Coach, kind of limping in to the All-Star break. I think they're going to make some big defensive changes if they get a week off and they have a time to think about it. They flip-flop their defense twice. You know, they do the real heavy, blitzing, aggressive scheme, and then like, oh, no, we need Brook Lopez closer to the rim. We need him playing drop coverage. They can't really figure out what they want to do on defense. The Nuggets, I mean, look, it's all about the postseason for the Denver Nuggets. They are doing what they need to do to get there. And, the funniest thing about these marquee matchups for the Denver Nuggets is I know Jokic doesn't care. Like, do you think Jokic feels any different in the morning waking up to play the Washington Wizards than he does to play the Milwaukee Bucks? This guy, he is just living his best life, JY.
He really is. And I think that's what I like about the Joker is he just goes out and he just plays no matter who he goes against. I think when you look at this matchup, guys, I want to make sure we start looking at the matchup at the center position and look at Brook Lopez tonight. His points plus rebounds with FanDuel's at 17.5. This could be something that I think he can get to. If you look at 17.5, he's gone over 13 of his last 15 games. He's going to have to score. And here's the thing. With the Joker worried about rebounding, right? He tends to sit inside, so that could open up Brook Lopez. He had 21 combined points plus rebounds in the game a couple of weeks ago. So I would be looking at Brook Lopez to go over that. I would also tend to look at when you have shooting bigs versus Joker, you got to look at it. I remember when Embiid played him, and I think I was over 1.5 made threes at plus money. I ran to the window because Joker's not going to come out and play him. Well, who is one of the best shooting bigs in the league? Yes, it's Brook Lopez, even though I think he doesn't get enough. 5 threes in the last matchup, over 1.5 made threes tonight on FanDuel at minus 111. Look for Brook Lopez to go over 16.5 or 17.5 points plus rebounds, but for him to get 2+ threes tonight.
All right, Coach, when you look at Giannis and his props for tonight, is there anything that you're interested in and which side you're leaning to?
Well, when you look at Giannis, to me, it's about he's going to have to try and see if he can score the ball here. And I think that's where you could probably get Giannis. Or, honestly, guys, I know this sounds crazy. Like, they're not going to play him at the three-point line, right? So, Giannis to make a three tonight, wait for it to come out on FanDuel. I don't think it's out yet. But if they hang it at plus money, I would go ahead and take Giannis to make a three. I know it sounds like nuts and crazy. He did make a three in the last matchup. If you're a guy like Aaron Gordon, what are you going to do? You're going to slough off of him. You're going to make him shoot the ball from the perimeter. Giannis, if it's at plus money to make a three on FanDuel, that would be something I'd look at because I think everything else looks really, really tight. Also, with Giannis, guys, this could be a live game play. Because his points prop sitting at 30.5. Maybe see he gets off to a slow start, let that number drop. And everything I've talked to people about is this. When he goes to the bench, watch his points prop. It's going to be calculated by the computer. It's going to go down as he sits. As he sits, before he checks back in, look at the number. If it's reasonable, jump in game, because then he'll play the rest of the quarter, rest of the half, so on and so forth.
That's actually such a good point, and something that I don't think about enough with the in-game live betting is if the numbers don't line up with just the way the guys' rotations are going. You used to see this all the time with Dirk back with the Mavs. He would play these really funky rotations. He'd play the first 4 minutes of the first quarter, then he'd go sit, then he'd play the final 4 minutes, then he'd come back in the second quarter for 2 minutes, then be out for 4 minutes, then come in for the final 6 minutes, just a way to manage load. So I like that tip. I'm gonna focus in on that for some of these teams over the next couple games. Let's move now to Western Conference number 1 seed odds. I can't believe what I'm looking at. This market, I'm gonna give a play in this market. We'll see what JY thinks first. But we have the Clippers as favorites at plus 175. The Nuggets coming in at number 2 at 2-1. The Timberwolves at plus 250, and the Thunder at plus 440. The Kings trailing way behind. You can get them at 19-1 in this market. What are we thinking here, JY? Do you got to play? Do you think this is right? Do you think this is wrong? Is this the right order, wrong order? What do we got here?
Well, when you look at it, to me, a good thing for folks to look at is you go to Tankathon, they do a great job when they pull up the remaining schedule, right? Who's got the strongest schedule down the stretch? So when you start looking at it, the Clippers have the 6th hardest schedule down the stretch. You start going down. Minnesota's at 18th, right? You look at Denver, they're at 20th. Here's what I'm going to say to folks. When you look at this, who does it mean the most to have the 1 seed? I think that is the critical thing to look at. To me, younger teams need to go for it more. Now, here is the caveat that people need to think about. And it happens, guys. You know and I know, and I'm going to say it. Teams will do some funky stuff down the stretch to avoid other teams in the playoffs. So start thinking about, as the season comes down to the wire, who's in that one side, who's in the other side. It's kind of like what we talked about before, right? Minnesota's got the best record. Now you have, Minnesota's won, the Clippers tied with them. Then you have Oklahoma City, Denver, Phoenix, New Orleans, right? So now start looking at all right, well, how does this line up? If Minnesota's the 1, they get to stay away from Denver. Do they want to play Denver? Hell no, they don't want to play Denver. Denver will crush them because the Joker owns Rudy Gobert. So start looking at matchups right down the stretch by a tricky schedule, but also look at how teams are slotted to be, how it benefits them in the playoffs, guys. Because I know it as a coach, you watch this stuff. It is a thing. Some teams match up better than others.
Yeah, you know how you fix that, Coach, by the way? Just reseed like every other sport does. The highest seed always plays the lowest seed, and that solves that whole problem. You can't avoid anybody. Mm-hmm. So we could have that conversation at a different point in time. But you do get a big matchup tonight between 1 and 2 in the West, or at least record-wise, in Minnesota and the Clippers, with the Clippers laying 4.5 here, a number that opened at 3.5, now has ticked up a little bit here. Is there a side, total 223, 224 side or total you like in this game? How do you break it?
Very simply, guys, I'm looking at this. Right now, if you ask me who's coming out of the West, I'm telling you it's the Clippers. I think they are so connected right now because the most important thing to me is the play of Kawhi. If everybody's in on the Clippers, I can't go away from them because you have seen, Minnesota struggle a little bit in these last 10 or so games. They've had some rough losses. They're going to a Clippers team that I think is the best. Right now, I like the Clippers minus the points. I think they get the win because of the play of their superstars. And I've just seen a couple of slip-ups that I have not been crazy about with the Timberwolves. And some of them, I know they had to win against Milwaukee, but I can't count Milwaukee. I don't think they're as good as everybody thinks. But they lose at Chicago. They lost that tight game at San Antonio. They've had some rough stretches here. I like the Clippers minus the points at home.
I don't hate that one at all. The Clippers, man. I cannot believe how seamless this James Harden thing is working. Now, I don't know if I agree that they're coming out of the Western Conference because I'm intimately familiar with the work that James Harden does in the NBA playoffs. And there's a lot of cold shoot. Now, obviously, it's a little bit different when your teammate is Kawhi Leonard, one of the coldest playoff performers of all time, versus some of the other guys that Harden has been in the playoffs with. The 76ers never have been a team that has rise to the occasion in the playoffs. The Nets, never a team that rise to the occasion in the playoffs. And those Rockets teams, some of the most famous chokes in the sports. So we'll see. It's a little bit different there. Let's go over to the Eastern Conference odds now. This is what I want to close us out with. We just did the Western Conference. By the way, the number that you were supposed to take there, the Thunder, baby. The Thunder are not the 4th best team in the Western Conference, and they're a team that really wants the 1 seed, I think, as evidenced by their young team. They need the easiest road possible. Eastern Conference is a little bit more interesting, JY, because the Celtics and the Bucks, they're teams that have been there and done that. The regular season is going to be a little bit less important to them. They think that they can beat anybody in the playoffs. You know the team that getting the 1 seed would mean the most to, the team that wants it the most. And by the way, the team that will run their starters into absolute dust in the regular season because of Tom Thibodeau's offensive philosophy, it is your New York Knickerbockers. If I was going to make a wager in this market, it would be your Knicks, I think.
Well, I think Tom will run him into the ground, is right. But I think Mark made a good point during the break. They're just not healthy. Like, they don't have OG for 3 weeks. We don't know when Randall's going to get back. They may get, Mitchell Robinson back at some point, but he's going to have rust. So I don't like them in regards to winning the division. I do like them as a chance to come out of the East because of what they're going to be able to do. Defend the ball, elite guard playmaking, and shooting, and depth. You could argue, folks, you may think this is not biased. The Knicks don't have the best player in any series versus any of these teams. But the Knicks have the most depth. And that is going to be important come playoff time. The Knicks are 6.5-1 to come out of the East. I think this is something that you could take now. If they get to the Western and Eastern Conference Finals and they get up a game or so, then you may be able to have a cash-out option. I think the Knicks are the second best team in the East. And you know what, Boston, with the inexperience of Mazzulla, right? I know he's got Charles Lee and Sam Cassell on his bench, which is going to benefit him. But you guys and I know, come playoff time, that Jaylen Brown not being able to go left becomes a thing. Jason Tatum is going to give you a stinker or two. Father Time may catch up with Al Horford at some point, and you never know with the injury history of Kristaps Porzingis. I think the Knicks are solidly the second best team in the East. And I will say this caveat. If you think Joel Embiid is coming back, at 20-1, you got to take a chance. Like 20-1, you got to take a chance that if he comes back, because I'll say this, before he got hurt, I thought the 76ers were coming out of the East. Because of, ready? Harden's gone. Joel's playing great. Maxey stepped up. And Nick Nurse is like a Ferrari compared to a Yugo of Doc Rivers. So if you put those things together, you think Joel Embiid's coming back? 20-1 Philadelphia sleeper play to come out of the Eastern Conference.
I don't hate it. I actually did a little bit of in-depth research on this procedure that Joel Embiid has had. It's kind of like mixed results, how guys come back from it. Like, you have to be non-weight bearing for a little while, so his conditioning might not be, 10 out of 10 when he gets back. But there's been plenty of guys in NBA history, like last 10 years or so, who actually have come back and played in season with this same meniscus procedure that Joel Embiid has had. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but I do think Coach JY's point, which is Maxey and Embiid, it's a pretty tough combo for any of those Eastern Conference teams to hang with. JY, thank you for hanging out with Zeno and I here. We are going to go ahead and run into break. We got more early line coming up for you next. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Kind of thought that Mike would maybe go in a different direction, or at least listen to some people with some different ideas.
If you were going to retain Mike Tomlin as coach, and I believe with both feet that you shouldn't let him really anywhere near this hire. That he had proved over the years that this was not an area of comfort or expertise for him.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
The Chargers have the 5th pick in the National Football League draft. There's a lot of different roads that they could take with this pick. And for the record as well, there's a few sports books out there already that already have next year's Super Bowl numbers up. The Chargers are like 30-1. So there's a lot of work to do.
Sports Rage Late Night, only on SportsGrid.
My goodness, if the Bucks come out strong and certainly make a point to say, look, even though we haven't been playing our best basketball, we're here to beat you down. And that's a big-time win for the Milwaukee Bucks.
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.
suffering the last. Take a look. Go look at it yourself. After Bear Bryant, all they did was lose.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid, your 24/7 sports wagering network.
We'll look at the Heisman Trophy
The early
race
line.
and what it all means. Individual success.
You should have tried to get something for Anthony Rendon, not bought at the deadline.
Newswire.
We're getting a lot of news, trades, cuts, and some movement in terms of starting quarterbacks, backup
Pharrell
quarterbacks.
Coast to Coast.
I want to watch great players make buckets and win games.
Game time
You have
decisions.
no idea what the heck the Blazers are doing and what they
In-game live.
Just
Prime
took 'em
time.
yard for a grand slam.
The bottom of the fourth inning in a 12-2 baseball game. We got football scores going on at Wrigley right now.
Sports Rage
That was good
Late
betting.
Night.
We waited for 1.5. We got paid
We did.
information. Did like the 2.5. Jumped on
There's
it.
no taking weeks off in golf betting ever. These are the best weeks to bet.
It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back from break here on the early line on SportsGrid. Davis Maddock and Mark Zinno with you guys here. We are going to do a little bit of Fade the Public. Our question for the public today is, will Patrick Mahomes go down as the GOAT? We got 55% on yes, 45% on no. Before I give my take, Zinno, I will turn it over to you for your answer.
No, he won't be. I am so over the reaction that we give in society today to everything and the overreaction that we give. Like, can we stop for a second? He's had a ton of success. He's the best quarterback in the league. I'm not denying any of that. But for crying out loud, you can't just assume that he's going to be this good the rest of his career. You can't just assume that he's going to stay healthy for the rest of his career. You can't just assume all these things. Like, stop trying to crown people before they actually get there. It's a long way away from winning 3 more Super Bowls. And guess what? It's really, really hard. And guess what? The Chiefs aren't always going to be constructed this way. And guess what? At some point, Travis Kelce's going to walk away. At some point, Andy Reid's going to walk away. Guess what? Like, all these things are going to change. Okay? So before we start having this ridiculous conversation, why don't we just pump the brakes a little bit? He's really good. He's very good. He'll go down as a top 15 quarterback in NFL history right now if he retired. There's an argument that he's a top 15 quarterback in NFL history. That's fine. You might even be able to say top 10. That's fine. But can we stop with all the other stuff? Because we're just getting way out in front at this point in time. And maybe it's just my Chiefs nausea, Davis, where I am. Like, at this point in time, there's a lot of things I'd rather see than the Chiefs win another football game. Like, honestly, I'd rather watch the president try to name 20 world leaders who are currently alive and in the position of a world leader than watch the Chiefs win another football game, because I think the first one's a little bit more entertaining to me. So I'm at this point right now where I've just kind of had enough of Kansas City.
Mahomes is second all-time in playoff wins amongst quarterbacks at 28 years old. He's not the GOAT yet. He is the best to ever play, but he's not matched Brady's accomplishments as of yet. We'll be doing more NFL chatter when we get back from break. Don't go anywhere. Hang out with Zinno and I for the last hour. Be back in a few seconds.